Eliza Harrow hit the platform harder than she expected, one hand catching the rough wood, the other clutching the side of her belly as if it might come apart. The world tilted for a moment. Heat, iron, dust, and the sharp sting of humiliation filled her lungs all at once. Her suitcase followed a second later. It burst open on impact. Clothes spilled like something ashamed to be seen, folded dresses unraveling into the dirt, a pair of worn shoes tumbling end over end until they struck the heel of a man who didn't bother to move. No one stepped forward. Not one hand reached down. Behind her, the train hissed like it was impatient with the whole affair. "Ma'am," the conductor said from above, not looking at her, "you'll need to gather your things and clear the platform." Voice carried just enough to be heard, not enough to care. Eliza pushed herself upright slowly. Her knees trembled, but she didn't let them give. Not here. Not in front of all these eyes pretending not to see. She brushed the dust from her sleeves with small, deliberate motions as if dignity could be restored one grain at a time. "I had a ticket," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the burn in her throat. The conductor adjusted his gloves. "No record of that." "Must be. No record," he repeated, sharper now. "Final." A murmur moved through the gathered townsfolk, not loud, not bold, just enough to let her know they were listening. Watching. Measuring. Eliza bent to gather her things. Each movement was careful, controlled, though her breath had started to come unevenly. She folded what she could salvage, ignoring the dirt, ignoring the way her fingers shook when she reached for the last dress. It had been white once. Now it looked like something abandoned long before she arrived. "Too old to be traveling in that condition." A woman's voice cut in from the edge of the platform. Eliza didn't turn right away. She knew that tone. It wasn't concern, it was judgment dressed in lace. "She should have known better," the woman added, stepping closer now. "Dragging trouble into a decent town." Eliza straightened, finally facing her. The woman wore a fine hat, its ribbon catching the light just so. Everything about her spoke of comfort, of a life that had never known this kind of moment. Eliza said nothing. She only held the woman's gaze for a second too long. It was enough. The woman's lips tightened. "Some mistakes," she said, lowering her voice, "but not enough, don't deserve sympathy." A few men nearby shifted their weight. One of them chuckled under his breath. Another looked away, pretending sudden interest in the horizon. Eliza closed her suitcase. The latch didn't quite catch anymore, so she pressed it shut with both hands, holding it there for a moment longer than necessary. When she stood again, she carried it like it still belonged to her, like she still belonged somewhere. "Ma'am," the conductor called again, impatience creeping in, "you're holding up departure." Eliza turned slightly, looking up at him. For just a second there was something in her eyes, something that might have been a plea or anger or both tangled together. "What is my name?" she asked. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the platform like a blade. The conductor hesitated, just a flicker. Then he looked past her, over her, through her. "No record," he said again, and that was that. The train lurched forward with a groan of metal and steam. Wheels turned. The world moved on. Eliza stood still, dust lifted around her feet as the cars passed, wind tugging at her hair, her dress, the loose edge of her suitcase. For a moment, it felt like she might be pulled along with it, like if she just leaned forward she could disappear into that noise and never have to stand here again. But she didn't move. When the last car vanished down the tracks, the silence that followed was worse. It settled heavy over the platform, over the people, over her. One by one they began to leave. No one spoke to her. No one brushed against her by accident. They gave her a wide, careful space as if whatever had happened to her might be catching. Eliza remained where she was. Only when the platform had nearly emptied did she take a step. Then another, slow, measured, like each one had to be chosen. At the far edge of the station, near the shadow of a weathered post, a man stood. He hadn't moved during any of it, tall, still. Hat low enough to hide his eyes, but not enough to miss what was happening. His hands rested loosely at his sides, not tense, not relaxed, just waiting. Eliza noticed him the way you notice something you don't understand. She held his gaze for a brief moment. He didn't nod, didn't speak, didn't step forward, just watched. And somehow that was worse than all the others who had turned away. Eliza looked down first, adjusted her grip on the suitcase, and walked past him. The boards creaked softly under her steps. The wind picked up again, carrying the faint scent of iron and distance. Somewhere behind her a door closed. Somewhere ahead, the town stretched out, unfamiliar, unwelcoming, already decided. By the time she reached the end of the platform, there was no one left to see her, no one left to remember. Only the dust, settling quietly where her name had been. Eliza slowed just slightly, as if even hope needed to be handled with care. The wood was worn smooth by years of travelers, edges softened, center bowed just enough to promise rest. It sat beneath a crooked awning that offered a sliver of shade, the kind a person could pretend was enough. She stepped toward it. A man reached it first, not quickly, not urgently, just enough. He lowered himself onto the center of the bench with a quiet grunt, spreading his elbows wide like he had all the time in the world. Another man followed, taking the far end. They didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge her at all, but they shifted just enough to close the space. Eliza stopped. The distance between her and the bench was no more than 2 steps, but it stretched wider than the town itself. She stood there for a moment, her hand tightening around the handle of her suitcase. Her other hand hovered near her belly, not touching, just waiting. The first man cleared his throat. "Plenty of standing room," he muttered, not quite to her, not quite to himself. The second man let out a soft breath that might have been a laugh. Eliza lowered her hand. "Of course," she said quietly. She didn't ask, didn't argue, didn't even linger. She turned away before her knees could betray her. The street beyond the station wasn't much kinder. Dust clung to everything: boots, skirts, the edges of buildings that looked like they'd been assembled more out of need than care. A few people passed her by, their eyes sliding off her as if she were something half-finished, or already undone. A bell chimed faintly as she pushed open the door to a small general store. Inside it was cooler, dimmer. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with tins and cloth and small, necessary things. For a moment, the quiet felt like shelter, until it didn't. The woman behind the counter looked up, Martha Pike. Her name was stitched neatly into the front of her apron, though Eliza didn't need the thread to understand who held authority here. The woman's gaze swept over her, quick, precise, stopping only for a heartbeat at her midsection. Then it hardened. "We're closing soon," Martha said, though the sun was still high. Eliza stepped forward anyway, careful, respectful. "I won't take long." Martha didn't answer, just waited. Eliza set her suitcase down gently, as if it might break open again if she wasn't careful. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a coin. It was small, worn, but it was all she had left. "I just need a little bread," she said. Her voice didn't waver. Martha's eyes dropped to the coin, then lifted again. Something unreadable passed through her expression, something that might have been calculation, or discomfort, or the faintest trace of something kinder that never quite found its way out. "We don't sell on credit," she said. "It's not credit," Eliza replied softly, holding the coin out. "It's payment." Martha didn't move to take it. "That won't cover it." Eliza nodded once, slow, accepting. "Then whatever it will cover." A pause stretched between them. From the back of the store, a man shifted a crate. The sound echoed louder than it should have. Martha folded her hands on the counter. "We've had trouble," she said. "People coming through, taking advantage." Eliza's hand remained extended. "I'm not asking for more than I can pay." "No," Martha said, her tone tightening just enough. "But you're asking me to ignore what everyone can see." The words settled heavy. Eliza didn't look down at herself. She didn't need to. "I'm asking for bread," she said. Martha's lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm saying no," followed, "not the quiet kind. The kind that fills a room and leaves no space for anything else." Eliza lowered her hand. The coin slipped back into her palm with a faint, hollow sound. "Of course," she said again. She picked up her suitcase, turned, and walked out without another word. The bell chimed behind her, lighter this time, like it was relieved to see her go. Outside, the heat had deepened. The shade from the awning no longer reached as far, leaving the bench fully exposed. The two men were still there, now joined by a third. Their conversation dipped as she passed, then rose again once she moved beyond earshot. A fragment of laughter followed her. She kept walking, step by step, breath by breath. Her vision blurred once, then cleared. She slowed just for a moment, one hand finally coming to rest against her belly. Not in panic, not yet, just in quiet acknowledgement. "I know," she murmured, so softly it barely made a sound. The street stretched ahead, longer than it had any right to be. A group of men stood near a hitching post further down, their hats tipped low, their voices low enough to blend with the wind. One of them glanced her way, then leaned in to say something to the others. Heads tilted. Shoulders shifted. They didn't approach, not yet, but they didn't look away either. Eliza's steps didn't change. She passed them as she had passed everything else, without asking, without stopping, without giving them the satisfaction of seeing her falter. Only when she had moved beyond them did her pace slow. Her breath came a little shorter now. Her grip on the suitcase tightened, knuckles paling beneath the dust. The world felt heavier somehow, like the air itself had thickened. At the edge of the street, where the buildings thinned and the land began to open, she paused. Not because she wanted to, because she had to. Her knees bent slightly, just enough to threaten. She caught herself before she could fall, shifting her weight, forcing her spine straight again through sheer will. No one came. No voice called out. No hand reached for her. Behind her, the town carried on, doors opening and closing, boots crossing wood, distant voices rising and falling like nothing at all had happened. Ahead, the road waited. Empty, uncertain. Eliza drew in a slow breath, steadying herself. When she exhaled, something inside her settled, not relief, not strength, but a quiet refusal to break where they could see it. She adjusted her grip on the suitcase, lifted her chin just slightly, and stepped forward again. Behind her, near the shadow of the station she had already left behind, a figure moved. Silas Creed had been standing there longer than anyone noticed. He had watched the bench, the store, the men by the post. Watched every moment she was denied, every step she forced herself to take without asking for help. Now, finally, he shifted. One step forward, then he stopped. His gaze followed her as she moved toward the edge of town, toward something uncertain, something unkind. His jaw tightened once, not in anger, in decision. But still, he did not call out, not yet. And that silence lingered, heavier than any word he might have spoken. The road out of town didn't ask permission. It simply kept going. Eliza followed it because there was nowhere else left to stand. The last building fell behind her without ceremony. No farewell, no final glance. Just the slow thinning of wood and voices until all that remained was open land and the dry whisper of wind dragging itself across the dirt. Her steps had grown uneven, not enough for anyone to notice, if anyone had been watching, but enough that she felt it, a hitch in her stride, a breath that didn't quite reach where it needed to go. She paused once, pressing her fingers lightly against her side. Just a little farther, she murmured. It wasn't clear who she was speaking to. The land ahead shimmered faintly in the heat. A line of fencing stretched off toward nothing, broken in places where time had simply given up. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called once, then fell silent. Eliza took another step, then another. The pain came without warning. It tightened low and deep, pulling her breath from her chest like it had been claimed by something stronger. Her hand flew to her belly, not out of panic, but instinct. She bent slightly, trying to hold herself together through it. "Not here," she whispered. The wind didn't answer. The moment passed, but not fully. It left something behind, a tremor beneath her ribs. A quiet reminder that her body had its own timing, its own decisions. Eliza straightened slowly. Her knees didn't feel as certain now. She adjusted her grip on the suitcase, though her fingers had begun to lose their strength. The handle pressed into her palm harder than before, like it was testing her resolve. Behind her, the town still breathed. And now, so did something else. Bootsteps, not rushed, not hidden, just approaching. Eliza didn't turn right away. She knew that sound. Had felt it earlier, back near the hitching post. The weight of eyes that didn't belong to kindness. "Well now," a voice called out, carrying just enough amusement to make it dangerous. "Seems the road ain't as friendly as the station." She turned then. 3 men stood a short distance behind her, the same ones from before. Their hats were low, their shoulders loose in the way of men who believed they already had the upper hand. The one in front smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You headed somewhere?" he asked. Eliza said nothing. Her silence didn't discourage him. It encouraged him. "'Cause it don't look like you got much left to get there with." A second man glanced at her suitcase. "Might be she don't need it anymore." A quiet chuckle passed between them. Eliza shifted her stance, not back, not forward, just enough to hold her ground without inviting anything further. "I'll manage," she said. Her voice was calm, too calm for what they expected. The first man tilted his head slightly. "Manage," he echoed. "Out here." He took a step closer. "Seem right? A woman in your condition being left to figure things out alone." It was again that wordless implication wrapped in something that pretended to be concern. Eliza didn't respond. She didn't need to. The distance between them was closing, slow but certain. Another step, then it stopped. Not because they chose to, because something changed. The air shifted in a way that didn't belong to wind. The man in front frowned just slightly, as if he'd felt it too but couldn't name it. A fourth set of footsteps approached, measured, even, unhurried. "Eliza," a voice said quietly behind her, as if it had always known her name. She stilled, not from fear. From recognition of something she hadn't expected. The men looked past her now. Their confidence didn't vanish, but it bent. Just enough. Silas Creed stepped into view, hat low, shoulders relaxed, hands empty. There was nothing in his posture that suggested threat, and yet the first man's smile faded. "Didn't see you there," he said, though it was clear now that he had. Silas stopped a few paces behind Eliza, not close enough to touch, not far enough to be absent. "I wasn't trying to be seen," he replied. His voice was level, quiet, but it carried. The wind seemed to ease around it. The second man shifted his weight. "We're just talking," he said, as if explanation might restore something already slipping. Silas nodded once. "I can hear that." A pause, the kind that stretches long enough for choices to be made. Eliza didn't turn around. She didn't need to see him to feel the steadiness in his presence. It wasn't loud. It didn't push. It simply held. The first man cleared his throat. "No harm meant." Silas's gaze didn't leave them. "Then there won't be any." Wasn't a threat. It didn't sound like one. But something in the way he said it made the space between words feel heavier than anything else spoken that day. The third man glanced at the others. A silent question passed between them, something unspoken, something understood. They stepped back just once, then again. "Well," the first man said, forcing a thin smile back into place, "seems like you got company after all." He tipped his hat not to Eliza but to Silas and turned away. The others followed. Their footsteps faded slower than they had arrived. Eliza exhaled, though she hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. The silence that followed was different, not empty, just quieter. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Then, slowly, Eliza turned. Silas stood exactly where he had been, still, composed, as if the moment hadn't required anything from him at all. Up close, his face carried time in ways that didn't show easily. Lines that spoke of decisions made without witness. Eyes that held more than they offered. "You spoke my name," she said. "It wasn't accusation, just truth." Silas gave a small nod. "I asked someone." Eliza studied him for a moment. "Why?" A flicker passed through his gaze, something brief, something carefully contained. "Seemed wrong," he said, "for a town to forget it." The words settled between them, not heavy, not light, just enough. Eliza's grip on the suitcase loosened slightly. The tension in her shoulders eased, though it didn't disappear. "You waited," she said. Silas didn't deny it. "Yes." Now another pause, longer this time. His eyes moved briefly to the road ahead, then back to her. "Because you weren't going to ask." Eliza looked at him, something unreadable passing through her expression. She said quietly, "I wasn't." The wind stirred again, softer now. Silas shifted his stance, not stepping closer, not stepping away. "You don't stand alone anymore," he said. There was no claim in it, no demand, just a statement offered without expectation. Eliza's gaze held his. For a moment it seemed like she might question it, refuse it, walk past him the same way she had before. Instead, she nodded once, not in surrender, in acknowledgement. The road still stretched ahead, uncertain, unforgiving, but it no longer felt quite as empty as it had a moment before. And behind them, far enough to be forgotten but close enough to matter, the town remained, watching, waiting, unaware that something had already begun to change.